Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power of Knowledge session. I'm Sonali Perera Bridges, founder and president of Shero's Rise. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, especially regarding a topic that is so important and vital, which is our knowledge and our education. Education to me is the power in which we have that no one can take away from us. It is our light, and it is what carries us through in the world. And to me, I've always defined education as the ability to have enough information where you can't just look at a problem and walk away. You look at a problem, you try to figure out what's going on here, what is my place, how can I help, what is really going on, and then do something about it. And we as women who are carers by nature really want to be able to do that. I'd like to share a little bit of my story with you and then introduce you to four of our panelists who are incredible women that I'm very, very proud to be here with. And then we'll open it up for a roundtable discussion with all of us that I'm happy to moderate. But for me, my family comes and originates from Sri Lanka. I came here when I was 5 years old, specifically for me to get an education. There wasn't an educational opportunity in Sri Lanka at the time that I was born. And my parents felt that in order for them to be able to give us the best that there is in the world, the only true gift that they could give us was really education. So I'm grateful for that. And both my sister and I are in education. So it's a full circle moment for us. That's all we do is spend that time. But as I was growing up, I would get in trouble for random things in the classroom. I would stand up in the middle of class. I would take a little longer or chat a little bit longer to understand. And I was always told, nope, shut up, sit down, be quiet, just do your work. And, 2 + 2 = 4. And just follow that rhythm. It wasn't a space that was allowed for critical thinking. It wasn't a place where I was allowed to be fully myself. It was just, I needed to regurgitate information. It wasn't until I went to college and was at Mount St. Mary's that I was asked what I thought about something. What do you think about this? How do you think this topic can come about, or what can you do about it? And understood things in a social justice lens, understood the power of my voice. And I also learned that how I receive information is not just by listening to someone and regurgitating it. It's listening, it's writing, it's being able to work with my hands and get dirty and be able to figure things out as I break the mold. That's how I learn best. And as we're growing in the world of education and I'm watching my own children go through this, everyone learns differently. I've been an educator now for 25 years. Everyone learns differently. And sometimes a traditional classroom doesn't allow for that. And especially in the world where we just came out of a pandemic, well, we're still in the pandemic, but out of our COVID restrictions, students were asked to be online and learn. That was very, very difficult for many people. I would be one of those people that it would be very difficult for. I tend to do better when I'm one-on-one with people in person rather than online. It's still a strange world to me, but it's something that students have had to deal with. And now that they're coming back into the real world, faculty and teachers are trying to figure out, is this the best model? Can I engage students differently, ask them different questions? Can I give them projects? And so today we want to engage and have a conversation about all of that. And the first person that I'd like to introduce to you to share a little bit about her story is Dara Barlin. And I want to welcome Dara to the stage.
Hello, Passionistas. My name is Dara Barlin. I am the CEO of the Center for Transforming Culture. And today I'm going to be talking about our current understanding of knowledge as power. And I'm going to try and mess with that a little bit in our traditional understanding of it. So I'm going to tell you a little story about a guy named Joe. So I was working with a client focused on developing a strong and thriving culture for an online community in an educational environment. This was a university setting. And I found a bunch of volunteers to actually try and support the process of creating culture in this educational setting. And of the volunteers, Joe really stood out as doing some powerful, powerful work in the field. I mean, this guy was killing it. He was inviting people into so many different conversations to listen to what the challenges were of students in the setting. He was talking to professors, listening to what their challenges were. He was bringing people together in small groups to talk about how to sort of identify what was working, what wasn't, and how to take action on that. And he was just building community in such powerful ways. And people were loving the conversations. He was finding ways to bring, a sense of humor through memes, to identifying what the core issues were of so many people in the environment. He was giving voice to so much of what people were frustrated by. And because of that, people got really excited about it. So he started drawing people to the community, and our community started thriving. They were just talking left and right, and people were feeling such a strong sense of belonging and relief to be a part of our community. And so we were really doing an amazing job of building this culture. And so I did what, a lot of folks in my position would do to recognize him, right? I didn't have money to give him for the work that he had. I couldn't give him a sort of a position forever in the organization, but I could give him a title bump, right? And I could say to him, hey, I'm going to give you the title of ambassador because you've been such an incredible volunteer. Like, I really want to elevate the work that you've been doing and give you credit for this incredible, powerful world that you've been helping to create. And about 5 minutes after I gave him the title of ambassador, I saw something switch. And as a result of me giving him this title, he changed his way of doing things. Instead of sort of asking people their opinions and listening to folks' stories, he started kind of telling people what to do in order to create community. And, I think he got this feeling that because he was now an ambassador, that meant that he knew more than other people. And therefore, his role was to tell people what to do. And I think he thought he was doing a good thing, right? But what we know now is that most people don't like being told what to do, right? It actually creates a sense of defensiveness. And a lot of people are not drawn to that. They're repelled away from it. And so as a result of his new style of telling people what to do, those conversations started dwindling. People stopped wanting to come to the conversation. People stopped wanting to engage with us at all. And our community was like on the brink of breaking, in part because, so many people who were once active and felt listened to and felt validated and felt like they were really being empowered to do something, were now felt like they were just being told what to do over and over again. And I think this is sort of the essence of power, right? In our difference of thinking about knowledge as power. I think it's just so endemic of so many of our educational institutions, right? Where we have these systems set up where people at the top of the ladder, right, say that they've got ideas and they want to impart them onto the schools and onto the students. And so we have teachers telling kids what to do and principals telling teachers what to do, and senior, superintendents telling middle managers, telling principals, telling teachers what to do, right? And the kids or the students, the young adults in college and across the board, they bear the brunt because at the bottom, of this spectrum here, and they are constantly being told what to do instead of being listened to, and instead of their knowledge being pulled from them, there's knowledge being pushed onto them. And I think that's the differential of power that we're playing with right now. That true power, right, or the power that's going to create the most positive change is when you can pull it out of folks, when we can collaborate with understanding what is the knowledge that you bring to the table or that students bring to the table, and what is the knowledge that we have to bring or we can bring, and how do we bring that knowledge together to co-create a vision for something better in the future. And so long as our institutions remain in the space of telling people what to do, we are going to continue seeing students who are not interested interested in accumulating knowledge, who are dropping out of school in their hearts or physically. And we're going to continue to see a lot of gaps in education and in our equity work and in our ability to actually realize our truest potential for ourselves, as well as all the young people in our educational institutions. So hopefully that gives you some fuel for some fodder for considering different variations of power, right? Are we using power to tell people what to do and to push on them, or are we using power to lift voices and to bring that knowledge in together so that we have a larger understanding of the truth, and how do we act on that to create positive change? So thank you for listening. If you want to check out more, please check out the Center for Transforming Culture and get in touch. And I hope you have some great sessions.
Thank you, Dara, for sharing your story with us and the amazing work that you do. I'd like to now introduce Dana Kaplan, who will be sharing her story with us.
Hi, guys. I am Dana Kaplan, a retired classroom educator, now educator in the world. I am sitting in California on the coast. To the left of me are mountains, and to the right of me is the ocean. And I intentionally share this piece because for the longest time in my life, I never thought that I would be able to create the learning world that I know I need, and also show, not prove, but show everyone how they can do the same. So today is about understanding your superpowers and understanding that everything starts and stops within you. I recently had jaw surgery and I cannot feel my lips. From here down, I cannot feel. So if I bite my tongue, I'll probably let you know and take a break. If I bite my cheek, I'll let you know. And I intentionally share that because the more we can engage in uncomfortable conversations and see that we are whole, we're enough, and we belong everywhere, is going to be the pathway to create not only holistic brain health, but the ability for all of us to access inclusive spaces, because the reality is belonging is our birthright. And knowing that deep down allows each of us to activate and discover our superpowers. So what do I mean by that? As kids, we talk about fantasy and we're encouraged to use our imagination. But what are we really doing to get to know who we are? And the question behind who am I, the richness, the deep self-awareness that I bring to the table allows me to then get curious about myself. And it allows me to recognize when conscious or unconscious biases come up. And as a newly certified coach in diversity, equity, inclusion, not only do I realize I have been a pioneer in so many aspects of my teaching, it also reaffirmed that we must commit to our collective and make sure that everyone understands the power within. In doing so, we're giving children of all ages, we're giving adults of all ages, we're giving our collective community of all ages the opportunity to discover, what do I need to continue thriving? How do I learn? Where am I going in my life? And who can help me? Where am I going to do it? And there are all the other questions. And the one question that I tend not to ask is why. And the reason for that is because I don't need to know why things are happening. What I need to know is, how am I going to either maintain or change? So when I talk about creating a space for children and for all learners, I left the classroom because I saw that emotional intelligence was not being put at the forefront of what we do. And then I discovered that the pressures that are being put on children are so exponentially grand that we are watching suicide rise and addiction rise and the inability to communicate. And then from there, I discovered that this is a cycle. And the cycle is what has been going on from our parents, our grandparents, and everything again starts and stops with who you are, how well you know yourself, and what you need. So I'm curious, how well do you know yourself? Do you know what makes you happy? That takes your happiness into the joyness state? Do you know what creates a feeling of discomfort? Do you know where you feel that discomfort? Do you know what sounds or words or being in specific places is doing to your entire mind, body, soul connection? How is it propelling you forward, and how is it preventing you from moving back? And it's important that we ask these questions because we are now out on the other side of a pandemic. And pre-pandemic, my focus was always on birth to 12th grade. And what I discovered during the pandemic is because everyone lived in a space of survival for so long, that parents then really realized, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. I am trying to make sure that my child's logging on to school, that my boss is happy with the transactions that I'm making. I have a screaming baby in the other room. And where's my husband? Or where's my partner? Or where's my... And you keep going on and on and on. And what I discovered in all of that is because of the dysregulation that is continuing to happen through generation and generation, because we're not prioritizing holistic brain health, is then transferring beyond the pandemic. So now I am humbled and I am grateful that I have the pleasure of working with people of all ages now around the understanding that my internal superpowers are what helps me thrive, authentically show up, and most importantly, put myself first. So I'm going to stop there for a second, and I want you to write down a few words. Belonging, selfish, curiosity. And I ask you to write these words down because I'm now curious, what comes up for you? Where do you feel the word? Where do you taste the word? Where do you hear the word? Where do you touch the word? Where do you smell the word? For the longest time, I used to think that it wasn't fair or okay or right for me to feel anger or disappointment. As a child, disappointment was a word that I heard so frequently that it triggered me. And when parents would say in my classroom that their child was disappointing, or I am disappointed in my child, I would watch this like nausea like circulate, almost like this like loop in my body. And I would tell parents, I would really prefer for you to choose a different word, because I'm not sure what your child has done that is so disappointing to you. And that question right there, what has your child done that is so disappointing to you, was one of the stepping stones to help me understand that it's not about the child. It's about the person that is feeling that feeling. So as I ask you to really look at these words, it's important to see, how are you holding on to them? How do they shape your day? How are they impacting your choices? How are they impacting response versus reaction? Because holistic brain health is not about meditating. It's not about being on a keto diet or all green diet. It is about really knowing what is happening in my body, what thoughts are my brain trying to feed me, what thoughts am I choosing to believe, and how are those choices to believe those thoughts impacting me and taking me in a place that I don't necessarily want to go. So as part of my story, language has always been a big piece. And receiving the language, distributing the language, and I share intentionally about language, because when we choose the words that we want to share, they are both purposely for where we want to take the conversation. They are purposely for where we want to go in the conversation. And they're purposely for what can or won't happen. And as I Cheryl of this, I'm thinking about, I can see images of points in my life where I vividly thought that feeling angry was a sign of weakness. Vulnerability was a sign of weakness. And I say that because I am now receiving, I'm laughing, I'm now receiving feeling back in my face after having invasive jaw surgery. And from where my hand is down, I don't feel. And I get very excited when I can start feeling my skin again. Something's itching and it means that I'm healing. That's me paying so closely attention to, oh my God, nerve endings are coming back. That's so cool. That's my superpower. My superpower is knowing me so deeply that I can sit here and tell you guys that when I was finally diagnosed 3 weeks before I left the classroom in 2018 with ADHD, and I was told, you have severe ADHD, I was like, thanks. Thanks for another label. 2 years later, I started medicine in 2020. And at that time, I realized that the medicine was actually going to help me overcome so many components in my life that I was critical of. And I remember the first time I called my sister after taking medicine and telling her all of these years, I joked that I had ADHD, and you would tell me my stories are so long and get to the point. And 1 weekend from taking medicine, I'm crying here with gratitude, knowing that my thoughts are clear. I know my purpose. I know what I'm trying to express. I can actually help in such a succinct way now. I'm proud of myself. And those words were never something that I felt I could say, because that fell into the category of being arrogant or bragging. So language itself is so critical to where we go in this world, and the stories that we create and the encouragement that we give kids and families and you. You are coming out of a space where expectations are changing. And expectations are a communication. Either have the conversation about what's working for you and in the business that you're in, or with your family, or where you are, because the communication piece must be at the forefront of how change is going to happen, not just for you, but for all of us. And in that process, from once I started taking the medicine for ADHD, I realized that ADHD doesn't have me. I have ADHD. Meaning, if I don't take the medicine and I run around not paying attention to time and I do not keep myself organized, that's when ADHD is controlling me. I have ADHD, which is my superpower, because I know how to make sure that I have everything organized, that I am asking for help, that I'm no longer embarrassed for saying, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you repeat yourself? Hold on a second. I feel my medicine wearing off, which means I'm not fully concentrating on you and I need to go take care of myself. Full circle, everything comes back to holistic brain health and understanding what are your superpowers to make sure you're putting yourself at the forefront of every decision, because I choose to be selfish now. And I want to let that sit for a moment. When you grow up hearing, oh, that's so selfish. How could you do that? How could you make that? How could you go be late for that? How could you choose to take the last brownie? You know, I mean, it's like as mundane as a brownie. That's so selfish of you. Today, I use the word intentionally. I am selfishly sitting here outside, speaking with all of you, hearing the ocean and watching birds fly over the mountains, because I am taking care of myself, from my soul, my mind, my body, in order to fully be present and show up as the renowned coach, educator, leader, game changer that I am in the world. And I want to encourage each of you to pay attention to, what do you need to do to change for yourself, to bring that joy and that happiness and that radiance? What do you need to do for your children to really get to know them, to allow them to be on their own journey, to detach from their outcome? Because outcomes are minimal, intentions are massive. So as we continue going through and we're looking at your stories and we're looking at my stories, even before I got on, I was like, oh my goodness, how much time do I have? What story do I talk about? And what I realized was that was my old paradigm, putting pressure on myself into chaos. You only have 2 minutes. Every word you say counts. Put pressure on yourself. You're being selfish if you take up time. But instead, I courageously asked the questions, and I wholeheartedly and abundantly received the answers. And so what I do want to say is get to know who you are, because those are your superpowers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. I now have the privilege of introducing you to Celine.
Hi, thank you, Sonali. It's actually Selene. It's okay though, unless you hear me say it, there's no way of knowing. But hi everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. I want to thank Amy and Nancy for hosting us here today, and it's such a thrill to share the screen with all these wonderful women. So I'm gonna hop to it, and forgive me. I'm gonna try to stick to my notes because if I don't, I'm afraid I'm going to ramble for too long. And to keep myself on track, I'm setting a timer. So that's how I function. Okay. So well, if you don't know me or know who I am, um I'm I'm physically disabled, and I have to let you know this because virtually you just it's impossible to know. So I'm a little person. I stand at 3 feet 9 inches tall. And it's very important for me to be here with you today because I want to talk about the inequities of education for children with disabilities. There is a huge disparity in education equality for children with disabilities, and I want to share my personal experience with you guys. So, in the education system, there is a tremendous lack of focus on facilitating the growth and development of children with disabilities to help them achieve personal development and, but most importantly, personal independence. Education targeting everyday aspects of life as an individual with a disability provides the best chance of success through independence. And as we all know, independence equates dignity. And that is something that is lacking in the guidance of children with disabilities in the school system. Now, to reflect on my personal experience, and granted, my school years were in the 1900s, but I'm here today because not much has changed to guide the success of students with disabilities. Now, had I been given the tools for independence by schools, I would have been spared a terrifying and impoverished transition into adulthood. Now, I'm not here speaking as a victim, and frankly, the anger I live with over the injustices that I have endured is the foundation of my resilience. Sometimes it's okay to be angry. It's a survival skill that has given me the strength to build a good life for myself. So I do have a very good life, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, but here's what contributed to my anger. I was not allowed access to an equal education simply because of my disability. I was the only little person in my family or any school I ever attended, and I was always made to feel like a burden instead of just being provided guidance and an education to develop my independence. A lack of equal access to education is where systemic forced poverty begins for individuals with disabilities. Now, much like Sonali's experience, uh, I come from a family of immigrants. In fact, I'm an immigrant myself. My family came to the U.S. From Mexico specifically so that us kids, my siblings and I, could get an education. So my parents had no resources, no formal education, no community support, and they still did everything they could to fight the LA public school system that insisted on placing me in special ed classes, having nothing to do with my intellectual abilities. Now, for the record, there would there would not have been anything wrong with being placed in a special ed class if indeed special ed students were actually being educated. Now, I cannot speak for today, but in the 1900s, when I was in school, special ed classes were nothing more than prisons for students with disabilities that were considered a burden and needed to be kept out of sight and needed to be kept segregated from the, I guess, general population. So my parents at one point even went as far as having my IQ tested, which actually proved that I had a very high IQ. My score was so high that my dad asked me to never tell my siblings because it wouldn't be a humble thing to do. So humility was big in my household. And this is actually the first time I've ever uttered a word about my IQ because I agree it's not humble. But I wanted to make a point because uh, what I'm angry about is the fact that it doesn't matter how high your IQ is if you're not given the tools to develop it. I had a terrible time in school. I was barely literate. I barely graduated high school, and I did not have the grades or the foundation to successfully complete college. Now, just a few quick examples of what my path in school was like. Um, I vividly remember in fourth grade, um, because I was the only little person at school in fourth grade, the school set up for a counselor to pull me out of class and have these like arts and crafts counseling sessions. And and I was pulled out of class for these counseling sessions during the pivotal mathematic lessons. So, because I was pulled out of class for these therapy sessions that were never explained to me, I didn't even understand why I was doing arts and crafts with a therapist. I missed learning the most basic, division, uh, uh, word problems, long format, anything that had to do with math. I never learned because I missed all those lessons doing arts and crafts and not being told why I was doing arts and crafts. It was bizarre. So I miss pivotal mathematic knowledge. Jump forward to high school in 10th grade. I was in an English class and I never learned anything about uh, basic literature because the teacher in class pulled me aside and told me that I never had to do any of the assignments because people like me do not need the knowledge. I'm never going to use it. So she made me feel like I was a teacher's pet when actuality she was robbing me of an education. So I had to sit next to her and just literally stare at the wall while everybody was learning the classics and writing book reports. So this contributed to me being practically illiterate. And in 11th grade, that's usually in high school when you go speak to your guidance counselor about your next transition in life. And I went to my guidance counselor, and he told me that not to worry about college because higher education was not a place for people like me. So these are examples of how students with disabilities are not given access to the same education that everyone else has. And even though I was integrated into, I guess, all the quote unquote normal classes, I was still singled out. I was still basically muted, ignored, and I was not immersed in any of the education. I was just a body taking up space so that my parents wouldn't be upset um, that I wasn't integrated. So it was very frustrating for me. So, but flash forward today, I'm very proud to say that I serve on the board of directors for Southern California Resource Services for Independent Living. It's a nonprofit organization created to be run by and for people with disabilities, offering support, advocacy, and information on empowerment in the attainment of independence from a peer viewpoint. This organization, SCRSIL, basically is picking up the slack for the public school system when it comes to providing transitional tools for students with disabilities graduating from high school into adulthood because society and the school system usually leave us out to dry. And that's why I had a very difficult, very impoverished early adulthood in my life. And so I just wanted to speak on that because this is a topic that about education equality that is really never addressed. I never hear anybody talk about this. And this is the population of students that are consistently left behind, even to this day. So, thank you for tolerating my bit of anger, and thanks for having me.
I don't think it's anger. I think it's called passion and telling the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Education system in America is flawed. It doesn't always serve every single person in the way and manner in which they can receive the education. So thank you to all of you for sharing your stories with us. They're powerful and important. I would like to start our roundtable and have everyone come on screen if possible. Sounds great. Thank you both. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. A lot of the things that you shared and talked about are things that I see on an everyday basis as an educator. I do college counseling as well, in addition to Shero's Rise and putting all of our programming together. And Dana, you talked a lot about ADHD being your superpower. I fully understand that and appreciate that. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions, and I think I know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask anyway. What do you think is the actual role of an education? Not just mathematics and English and writing, but what is the actual role education plays in our life?
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, Dana. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What did you? Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say very briefly that I believe the responsibility of an education or educators is to help and guide critical thinking. You know, this goes beyond the basic lessons. It's like how to become an independent thinker. That's all.
I'm laughing at myself because I was breathing in your question so deeply that I wasn't sure. Like, I didn't even pay attention to who you directed the question to.
Both of you.
I think the role of education is to give all of us the opportunity to know, to discover, and to embody self-trust, because the ability to trust who we are and to know that we are our own validation, and to know that at the end of the day, my opinion of me is the only one that matters. It's not the grades, it's not the salary, it's not the awards, is one of the most fundamental and profound gifts I've actually not only finally given myself and realized that I needed that as a child, which is part of the missing link when I chose to go into education. I knew in kindergarten something was missing. I could see the children being isolated in various ways. I could hear the language being used. And then of course, you know, as we go through generations and languages changing, but practices are not changing, but you know, we're always throwing in new jargon. I think to really be able to teach, model, and coach children across all ages and spaces, all learners across all ages and spaces, to really understand what does embodying self-trust mean, and to take those risks, because that's when we lead with courage and hold fear's hand instead of sitting back on the sidelines wanting to be a people pleaser, perfectionist, all of the other components.
Thank you. We need to get you to be a mentor because self-trust is one of our pillars. So
I am one of your mentors. I have to just sign the papers and send them back in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Selene, am I saying that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm working on it. I apologize I butchered it with a name like
No,
Sonali.
no apologies necessary.
I don't make that mistake twice.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, it's important. And, you know, in a world where we're talking about, you know, what is the role of education From a college perspective, I'm very happy to see that we're not using standardized testing anymore to make decisions about admission for students, because it is not reflective or indicative of a student's ability to be successful. And much like you, I was told too, you can't go to college. You don't have the right test scores. According to standardized tests, I can't speak, read, or write English. I think I do that well. So, it's not a great indicator of who we are. Next question, though, is what do you feel is the most exciting or effective learning environment that you have been in or choose to create for others? What would be that for you?
I think for me, and it's more fantasy based because I never really had a proper experience or various options, on ways to learn. But I know by profession, I'm an actor, and that is hands on training. That is an actual physical thing that you do, which is why I really have gravitated to it and done okay in it because I learned by doing. And I look back and I see like God, I could have excelled so much in school if somebody physically showed me and had me, even mimic what they're doing. I could have been a scientist. I'm a big science geek, and that's I could have learned so much if I was taken on field trips, to meet astronauts. I was taken, actually shown. Don't tell me, show me. And I think that would have made a tremendous difference in my life. And so I know I learned by just seeing and doing, like the actual action. It's the energy. I'm sorry. It's just a delay in my thought, but I just wanted to say I think what it excites me is the energy of doing, just the gets your endorphins going, and I want more. And I could have learned so much. I'm sorry, Dana.
No, I interrupted you because I am just like, you affirmed what I do. So I ran my classroom when I was a classroom teacher for 17 years, 18 years, something like that. And I started my teaching career in Atlanta with the inner city Atlanta Public School, and we went everywhere. And in Atlanta, you were only allowed to take 2 bus trips. So I had to really be creative. And I'm a big believer in real life learning. Why do I need to understand math? Because you're going to go to the grocery store and count apples and oranges and what do you need for your recipes? And we would go and do that. And then through that work, parents that did not know how to read would start joining us, and then they started learning to read. So that real life learning in action not only helped their children, but it was also bridging that disconnect in families because they weren't given the opportunity to learn how to read, or English wasn't their first language, right? And then fast forward, I moved to New York and started multiple programs. And in doing so, my principal stopped telling me no because she knew I would always find a way to say yes. I would take anywhere from 60 to 100 field trips a year because I don't believe in sitting in a classroom. Now, granted, yes, at the time I had not been diagnosed with ADHD yet, and these are kindergartners, so they're super hyper and I'm super hyper. So we were like great balance for one another. But like jokes aside, I would still go back and do it no different, because the ability to watch children's faces when they mastered understanding base 10 and moved from kindergarten until a 3rd grade math level, which then allowed them to go for me to take them to Dylan's Candy Bar when it was open and purchase candy and understand the impact of what a discount means, that I get to get more now because they gave us a discount on bulk, right? To understand the real life purpose of what is it that I'm doing, to take them to museums, sketch a tree because it's too cold to do it outside, and then to draw and to see the rings. And that is what life learning is. And I don't know how. One of the many reasons I left the classroom is because I firmly believe if we would give children the opportunities to have more real life learning, their experiences would be so much more profound, and the risk taking and the belief in themselves, circling back to trust, And so for me, I wholeheartedly agree with you that real life learning is one of the most profound and essential foundations that we give children, because that is where opportunities open up that they never would have considered, ever.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And also, how we as women and girls learn is literally by doing. That is what is scientifically proven. So, what you're both talking about is really, really relevant. Being in a classroom with women when I first went to Mount St. Mary's University, we sat in a circle. There was no hierarchy of where you were. Everybody got to be seen. Everybody had to be able to speak and talk. And it was all hands-on learning. And that's how we as women tend to learn. That is our style of learning. So what you're both speaking to is fantastic and accurate as well, scientifically proven. So thank you for that.
If I may actually add on to that one piece also, if we were actually to do more hands-on learning for children today, it's not just about gender, it's about understanding that you don't need to diagnose a child with a learning disability, you need to let them understand how they learn. And that in itself was a huge piece of why I went into education. I knew I had a learning style difference, but I was never tested. My siblings are brilliant, and I didn't think I was going to college because I had such severe test anxiety. And the test anxiety was due to so many limiting beliefs, right? So if we're really looking at holistic education and what we can do for accessibility and inclusivity for all, because again, we all belong, it's really looking at what can we do to elevate how we approach exploration and curiosity and teaching for the collective, so that while females may scientifically learn from the doing component, we may actually discover that males do too, but they're never really given the opportunity. And I think that goes back to elevating what is our perspective and what is our intention through the educational lens.
Very true. Thank you for saying that. That's very, very important. We do have a question in our chat, and I encourage any of you who are here to please drop your questions in the chat, the Q&A, actually in the Q&A section. But what is the number one tip you can each give to those of us who want to be better advocates for people in marginalized communities when it comes to this issue?
May I ask you a favor? Can you
Sure.
share where that is, or can you drop the question in? I'm also a visual, auditory, and so I can
Absolutely.
reread. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, I just based on my experience with the organization that I work with, SCRMSIL in Southern California, that provide guidance and education to children with disabilities. One thing we do at the grassroots level is we go, because with the organization, I've had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and have one-on-one meetings with our legislators. And we speak to Congress about making sure they provide funding for these types of programs. So I think it's very powerful to become politically involved in your immediate community. When you're voting for your local representatives, find out where they stand on equal access to education for everybody. That's where that is the most powerful way to impact the future of education.
I would add on to so there's a few points that is all encompassing within the number one tip. So the umbrella is the number one tip, but the raindrops that I see from being an advocate, it's first recognizing where your conscious and unconscious biases, and recognizing what is your intention and what is your commitment to making sure that you maintain that advocacy. So being an advocate is what I do. I sit on myriads of meetings, from IEP meetings to holistic school meetings to how are they going to reform and rechange? Like, what are they doing? What's working? What's not working? And to actually be an advocate, we go in with an open mind and curiosity. And being able to keep that curiosity space prevents you ever from going into judgment. But before you go in, you have to be very clear on where your conscious and subconscious bias is coming in, right? Like for me, my heart and soul lies in inner city schools. I have nothing to fix there. I have everything to learn and grow with. And I remember when I was first interviewed for my very first job in Atlanta, it was an all Black school. There, actually, that's not true. It was Black and Hispanic. And one of the leaders said to me, well, what do you think you're going to do here? You know, I'm fresh out of grad school, chipper, so excited. I just like want to lick the ground I'm on because I'm just like in the happiest place. And I had to sit there and collect myself at 23 years old and say, I really don't know what we're going to do here. What are you going to do here? And when I tell you that two of her colleagues, I will never forget this as long as I live, because they saw me as a person they thought I was coming in to fix something. That conscious bias they immediately saw. And they don't know my story. They don't know my learning experiences. They don't know the bullying that I experienced. They don't know what I'm going to bring to the table. So I think it's really about starting with what is your intention as the advocate, being so self-aware and granular about what you want to do, and be open to the opportunities that can unfold from it.
Absolutely. And we have one final question. And speaking of intention, I always believe in intention, inspiration, and impact. Like those are the three things that I actually line up together when it comes to working with students and being an educator. What is my intention? How do I inspire them to be able to have a positive impact in their life? So my 3 I's. So I share that with you. But we're going to wrap this up, but I have one final question and I just want you to answer this. This is an open-ended question that I hope that each of you can add to. So the next 100 years of education should ... What should it look like in the next 100 years of education? What should it look and feel like?
Oh, I was hoping Dana would go first.
Would you like me to? I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain over here.
Well, I'm going to start with the word. Excuse me, my tongue is still getting tied, adjusting to this new positioning in my mouth. I am going to start with the word should. I don't believe in should. I don't think we should do anything. What do we want to do? What can we do? What would you like to do? Is my perspective, because when we use the word should, it leads us towards judgment. It leads us towards criticizing. So what I would like to see happen over the next 100 years is really putting holistic brain health at the forefront of everything we do. Creating systems where it is not about buying another curriculum to say that you have a curriculum. It's about actually understanding your community. It's having a systematic approach to your personalized community, and making sure that it is accessible and inclusive from all avenues. That's one space. The other space is also managing and learning about how do you teach learners to understand and embody their own learning styles while also staying open and available to learning your learning styles, right? Like as simple as you read the question and I was like, oh goodness, wait, I heard it, but I didn't hear it. And now I need to actually quickly advocate for myself and ask for it in print. And then I found the question, right? It's like being able to participate in all spaces and places with confidence. And I actually believe that we could do this well before 100 years if our collective put in action, put in commitment, looked at their morals and their beliefs and their overall hope for change. And that's really what it comes down to. We're either going to stay in the same cycle because everyone's going to complain and use the word should and twist and turn and do and that component, or we can create a space where a plan is designed, we put it into action, we create the data, looking at the data, what's working, what's not working, let's tweak, let's rebuild, let's keep going, let's add on more people to participate and continue from there. So that's my hope.
Thank
I
you,
think
Dana.
really Dana said it best, but just to echo her sentiment, I think ultimately my dream to see the future of education being a community responsibility, not just the actual educators in a location, not just the parents, but the entire community that people live in. They say it takes a village. And I think there's power in community. So that way, no one gets left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's accounted for, everyone's valued, and everyone's empowered.
Thank you. Hi, Dara.
Hi, hello. I'm so sorry for my other speaking event went a little long, so apologies. I'm coming in a little hot here, but sounds like amazing conversation going on.
Great conversation going on, and we were wrapping up, but I wanted to give you a moment, if you can, maybe perhaps share what was your favorite moment or experience in your own education that you felt that you grew the most from.
You know, I'm really going to build on what other folks have been saying here about um, creating spaces of community, that learning happens in communities, right? And so I think where I did not do very well in school at first. I did not really learn very well from rote memorization and just sort of trying to push information back on people. But when I started to really recognize my own skills and my own talents was when we were working in groups and we got to build on each other's ideas. And there was a sense of connectedness and a sense of excitement where we were able to continue building on each other's ideas and building together in that space. And it allowed me to figure out where my talents were and everyone else to contribute where they had skills and talents. And I just got so much energy from that. And I realized from that point on, this is how I want all my learning to be. I wanted always to be in groups where we're sort of figuring it out together. And so that to me has shaped my mindset around teaching and learning from now on, not thinking about the teacher as the harbinger of all the information to impart on other people, but as a facilitator to help bring out what people already knows and to lift all of that up in ways that take everybody up to the next level. So I'd say that for me, community level experiential learning was what did it for me.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dara, for joining us. Dana and Selene, I really appreciate all that you have shared with us regarding your knowledge and your heart space. I am a firm believer that education can change the world. It's the only tool that we have. And I look forward to seeing what our future holds with extraordinary women like you on the side. So thank you all for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at our next session.